Hey, it's Aaron the Metal Theologian. All right, so I'm gonna do I'm gonna do a another 10 records that nobody in the vinyl community has. Except I'm actually not going to quite do that this time because this time, last time I kind of showed some unique things. But it was such a cool topic. What I kind of wanted to do this time was show a few more that are like, there are some rare ones in here too, right? But either ones that are by popular bands that either it seems like people overlooked or whatever, or more than that, most of these actually are just bands that are either cool for whatever reason, or obscure ones that aren't that expensive that maybe you can score a copy of and find something cool without spending a pile of money on it. Because believe it or not, there's still a lot of that shit out there. That's one reason why I get so annoyed when people just talk about, the big bands all the time. It's like, dude, instead of being mad about being price gouged over like fucking Steely Dan records, why don't you check out a fucking Null Set record or something? It's better and it's cheaper. Anyway, so I went back to make sure I wasn't going to repeat any fucking records, right? Because that would have been embarrassing. And I saw that I played a polka record on the last one. I played that Dave Stacy one, so I'm playing my other polka record today, which is the Maddies Brothers with Who Stole the Kishka. That's what the thing looks like. Yeah, so what should we start with here? Well, I just mentioned the Null Set, man. So let me start with this one. I just kind of rediscovered this one. This is sort of an old friend, actually. And I had this. I got this from the guy in Cleveland, actually, who I got some of the other records from that I've shown. Like several of the records that I've shown, I got from this one guy at a shop in Cleveland. And this was actually a stack of shit he was just sort of like didn't really need. Like he gave it to me for free with a few other things. Like there was a little bit of water damage on that one. He's like, "Oh, I can't sell this, and it's cool, so just take it." So yeah, and he said, I'd never see one again, and I actually didn't like in shops because so you say that to me, that's a fucking challenge, right? So I just gonna keep my eyes open to see if I find the Null Set record again. So as it turns out, I've been listening to all this sort of post-punk stuff lately with the Killing Joke and the Diagram Brothers and all that shit. There's the Maddies Brothers single. It's back with Port Key, which I suspect is in. I don't know. I was gonna say Polish, but it might be Slovak. I actually don't know about those fucking guys. Anyway, so this is the Null Set. I went and revisited this one, went sort of, oh well, that's probably going to be like, I wonder how much of that thing's gone up because I haven't fucking seen a copy like since that old copy that I got rid of 20 years ago. And this fucking thing I ended up getting for like 10 or 15 bucks. So apparently not. And this is, what this really kind of is to my ears is like a new wave band wanted to went prog. This really has some prog moves to it. Fuck. Can't see the speed. All right, there we go. Yeah, but as far as I can tell, this band is completely obscure, man. It's a little sort of zany. But it's a record people don't talk about much. I think they're Canadian. Yeah, and that's all the information I have on them. I suppose I could use like the internet and try and find some more shit, but I haven't done that. And I don't even know if I really want to, because it's sort of one of those things where maybe my own story is a better story than the original thing. Speaking of stories, if you didn't check out my talk with Little Bill last week, that's great. You can see how bad I am when it comes to like pretty much anything recorded after 1990. But it was kind of cool to have someone from outside of the ecosystem come in. You know what I mean? And, I've been a fan of that channel for a while. Totally encourage you to check it out, Little Bill, if you can handle it. But sometimes when you're talking with someone about another topic, you can sort of tell that they know their shit when they're talking about music, like the way they'll sort of reference things and that. So I sort of picked up on that, and I was like, man. And then he made his punk rock video. I mean, there's sort of a predecessor to that one, but the punk rock video, so like, man, goddamn, I'm gonna fucking reach out. Because I'll let other people want to talk about his politics and shit. But, I'll let people want to reach out and say, hey, man, let's talk about records, Actually, it was a really fun talk. I'm still digesting it, but, I did run right out and buy this. Black Messiah by D'Angelo. And I gotta tell you, I love this fucking record. Now, I'm gonna digest it a little bit more, okay, and like come back and talk about it next time. But like, I was expecting it to be cool, but I love this record. All right. Anyway, where were we? It's, you know, it's kind of prog-ish for a new wave band, but it definitely sort of has that kind of sound to it. The horns feel a little bit self-conscious to me, but definitely within sort of the range of what I'm willing to accept as far as bands sort of, you know, being a little bit up themselves like we all are when we're in our early 20s, right? So, yeah, I really kind of think this is a little bit of a gem of a record. You know, it's not the greatest thing of all time, but no one seems to know about it. It's, as of right now, in 2023, it's still pretty fucking cheap. This one's probably less cheap than that one. This record's actually way worse. But I've never seen anyone else in the vinyl community show the Ladies WC record. Yeah, this band is from Venezuela. And they translated for you there. Baño para señoritas. Even I know that much Spanish, right? So this is actually, there's a reissue that came out, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. Like the Shaddux label, when they first started out, they were called, I guess they called themselves Little Indian, but like their releases were all like 10 Little Indians and 9 Little Indians and 8 Little Indians and so on, like the song. It's kind of silly, but anyway, this is One Little Indian. I actually had all 10 Little Indians at one point, except for like 1 or 2 of them. But I let them all go because they all sucked. I like held on to them for a while. In fact, those are a lot of those records went into my Militia record. If you've been there, you know. All right, so that was record number 2 out of the 10 here, right? Yeah, here's another one. I'm actually showing this one from Mr. Bizarro. So there's this German band called Geronimo that made a fantastic fucking record. Just called Geronimo with a J, and it has well, it's Geronimo on the cover, I'm pretty sure. Actually, I'm sitting trying to remember who it is. Oh, duh. Anyway, great record, and actually, you know, factors in pretty significantly to my belief that any record from the continent of Europe with an American Indian on the cover is going to be awesome. Because that Geronimo record is great. That Osage Tribe record from Italy is great. So anyway, so Geronimo, they made that one record that was fucking fantastic. But they made some singles and shit too. And I don't really know that much about their history. They made a couple other records that I wanted to check out. Really sort of the weirdo for the catalog is for some reason they were on a split with Creedence Clearwater Revival, right? And not only that, but that was the cover. Like, what the fuck, right? And this thing is from, oh, it's an original Admiral production. I have a feeling that's not quite true. Yeah, I mean, it's not like just hits on this. I mean, the Midnight Special's on here, you know, so, and there's a Bellophone release. They must have had some sort of licensing deal. Anyway, this record really isn't the best of Geronimo. And if you want to CCR fix, there are easier ways to get one. And probably better ways to get one. But this is it. It's actually on this purple vinyl. And I'm just checking the date, because this is like 1970 or something like that. For colored vinyl, this is really early. I don't see a date, but I'm pretty sure this came out before the LP, the one that I was hyping a minute ago. And I am pretty sure that LP is like 71 or something like that. Someone in the comments is probably going to figure this shit out. Like someone who will take the trouble to look it up. Anyway, I've not seen anyone show this. I don't really recommend it, but it's definitely a weird sort of oddball of a record. And it's not bad. You know what I mean? There's nothing about this record that sucks. It's just not really the best of either band, you know? It's more just sort of a weird curio because it's so funny that it even exists. That's 3. So what are you going to do? Are you going to stay in Germany? No, let's go to Jamaica for a minute. Actually, we're going to Britain. Because people talk about Lee Perry and the Upsetters and that, but this record doesn't seem to get a whole lot of love, and I'm sure the fact that it's hard to find doesn't help it at all. Okay, let me just concede that right out. And there was a reissue recently, meaning like within the last maybe 5 to 10 years, something like that, of The Good, the Bad, and the Upsetters, the Jamaican version, which apparently Lee Perry was a lot more involved with. I don't know the stories with this exactly, but apparently he went over there to like make a couple records for Trojan. And this was, I mean, because there were a couple on Trojan, right? And this was supposed to be The Good, the Bad, and the Upsetters. But like somehow there was some sort of beef with the studio, and like basically Lee Perry ended up getting pissed off and like taking his name off it or something, and this record ended up getting left behind. And the Lee Perry record is great. I mean, it's probably better, in fact. If you have a choice between that one and this one, you should probably go for the other one, and that other one is going to be cheaper too. But this is a cool record in its own right. It's a little bit lower key than that, but it still has some of that eccentricity. I mean, it sounds like a record that Lee Perry had his fingers on, you know, probably as much as like the Junior Murvin record or something like that, you know. If you're expecting it to sound like Return of the Super Ape, don't bother, okay? But if you like that sort of level of, you know, Lee Perry-ness, this is a really good record. It's a really cool record, and I haven't seen anyone else in the vinyl community show it before. All right, so here's another one I'm going to hype for a minute. So I'm sort of timing this a little bit. This is another Cleveland band, although I did not get this one from the same guy. Now that I'm thinking about it, this actually is kind of Pagans related, and I have something else that's kind of Pagans related that I'm going to show in a couple minutes. But you know something? I'll live with myself. This is a record, very cheap, because nobody gives a fuck about it. Venus Envy is the band. And actually, when I was hanging out with the one guy who had been in the Pagans, this guy, years after this, like this was he was like talking about having been a musician. I asked him what bands he'd been in. This was the band he mentioned, rather than the fucking Pagans. And I figured that out later. You know, as a kid, I didn't know anything yet. I was like, holy shit. It's on Herb Jackson Records, which I understand was like basically a P.O. box that Cleveland bands would share, so it looked like they had a label. But to all intents and purposes, these are private pressings. And anyway, this is like, I suppose it's a little bit gothy sounding, but more than that, it's just kind of an eccentric, like, cool rocker that sounds a little bit anachronistic in 1985, but probably sounds more 1985 than it would sound any other time. But this is a little gem of a record. It's dirt cheap. The first side, it's only 3 songs. The first side, Space Rock 85, is probably the weakest, so I put on the second side here, you know? That's a pretty cool sound, isn't it? You got that sort of Velvet Suicide thing going that you hear in the Cleveland bands. Venus Envy. So here's another Jamaican one, another reggae one, in fact. And you know something? I know that there are people who showed Prince Far Eye records before. I haven't seen anyone show Liberty before, other than me. I've shown it a few times because I love. This is one of my favorite Prince Far Eye records. But fucking, I'll tell you something, man. People don't talk about Prince Far Eye enough, and I know there aren't a whole ton of reggae fans in the vinyl community, or you know, as it were. But like, if you're not listening to Prince Far Eye, man, you're fucking missing out. Prince Far Eye is one of the coolest fucking things ever. If you like the dub shit, and that's what you prefer, it's like, you manage like really sort of dry dub shit and someone just like telling stories sort of on top of it. You can either listen to or not, it doesn't even matter, because it's great either way. You know, when you want to let it wash over you while you're doing something else even, or just sort of take it all in and really focus. And I don't say this often about lyrics, if you watch my channel, okay? Prince Far Eye is fucking great. So that's if you're coming from the dub side. If you're coming from more of a roots side, he has more of sort of like a little bit of sweetness in that. Or like sort of bringing a couple backup singers, that sort of thing, and sort of engage with some of the singing. And it might not be as easy for you to get into as if you're coming from the dub perspective, or if you're like comfortable with DJ shit generally anyway. But it's still worth a shot, because Prince Far Eye is so fucking cool, and he made a lot of records, and they're all great. And only a couple of them are hard to find, actually, so. Alright, here's another German one. I'm pretty sure I've shown all of these before, but I don't recall anyone else showing them too. And by the way, I deliberately left out any metal, because I feel like every fucking video I make, people tell me they haven't seen this record or that record before. So I kind of, feel like with metal at this point is cheating. Also, with the prices having gone up so much, it's not as fun. I kind of talked about that before, but it's like, I'm trying to gloat about all the expensive shit. I'm trying to turn you on to cool bands, right? So, Spiegel. That's a weird ass cover, isn't it, man? This is a really cool, heavy, German prog rocker, man. It has that sort of German darkness. Drosselbart. That's another great band. Or Ihre Kinder kind of has that. Fuck, most of those bands do. What a great picture, right? I mean, Jesus, dude, just the fucking color palette, right? I wonder if it's the photographer who did that first Sabbath and that Zior record. It actually kind of looks similar. Anyway. Yeah, all the titles are in German on this one. You don't see that very often. But this is a great record. And by the way, they called it, it was actually their first record. But for some reason they decided to call it Spiegel 2 because they had already made a record under the previous name. They'd been a beat band called the Royal Servants, and they made an album. So I figured this is their second album, so they call it Spiegel 2. Makes a ton of sense, right? It makes so much sense that, I'm just being pelted with sense. And, it's taking little chunks out of my skull. That's how much fucking sense it makes. You know something? I'm gonna go to the other Cleveland one right now. So you might see how these are kind of similar, but this is another really sort of cool one. And this one I haven't seen around. I don't believe this next one I'm going to show you is super expensive, but this is the other one that I got from that shop in Cleveland, that legendary shop in Cleveland that hasn't been there in so long. And it's this one. I'm not even sure what this is called. That's Less Raving Sounds. Who the fuck is Less Raving, So yeah, this is an actual piece of newspaper. I think it's the Cleveland Press too, which is defunct for a long time. But anyway, yeah, and this is the label there. And there are actually a couple songs on this thing that that turned up on the Pink album too. And this is 1981, so this is a little bit earlier. I think it's a little bit earlier. When the hell did the Pink album come out? 82, 83, somewhere in there maybe? Who the fuck knows? I hope y'all have the Pink album by the Pagans, though, because that's one of the greatest fucking records of all time. If you're into punk and you don't have the Pink album, I don't want to say you're not into punk, because I'm not the real expert in punk. I've got no business passing that kind of judgment, but I will say you're missing out on a great fucking record. I love how this thing is yellowed, too, I've got to say. It just looks so vintage, This newspaper I'm afraid to touch almost. It's so, you can tell I just had a fucking stencil. They were just printing these things. Trying to find a clue as to which paper it was, but yeah, I don't want to mess with it too much. There's probably a time when I would have known, but I don't know, man. I mean, I was basically a little fucking kid anyway, so shit, I have to figure out how to get that back into the sleeve. Alright, here's another one. People don't even talk about Negative Land very much. I don't think I've ever seen anyone else show this one. I probably show this one more than any other Negative Land because it's kind of fun to show, because this was sort of the one to have back in the day, if you know the story and shit. But I was a pretty big fan of Negative Land. It's funny because I never saw Metallica live and I never saw Slayer live, but I saw Negative Land live. That's kind of there are a lot of things like that sort of in my background, I guess, my music history. But I remember there was a guy at the show who had a tape of this, so he was having the guy signed or something, so. Yeah, so anyway, there's the SST pressing. There's a lot of drama. It's actually a little bit of a story to look into if you're familiar with it, but I don't feel like recounting it here. It's basically they got sued by they like did this YouTube parody and they got sued by the band and by Casey Kasem, and then SST got mad at them because they were kind of being sanctimonious about it, and so they were pissed at SST because SST wasn't standing behind them, which you could understand, but like SST was kind of like not wanting to get sued out of existence by Island Records and like worried about their other bands, and Negativland was kind of being dicks, so you could see their side too. And I don't even know how shit ended up, but you know, I was fascinated by all the intrigue when I was like first like getting into that shit when I was in high school, and Negativland seemed like just the most weird and obscure thing you'd come across, you know. It's like the sweet ballad. It's funny because it's called Angela, and maybe there was an actual Angela in one of their lives, but I would be willing to bet money that it has more to do with the Stones song. Fucking Angie. Alright, so how many is it? I think that's 9, right? So here's the last one, man. There are a lot of Sisters of Mercy fans, but I've never seen anyone else show this one. And this one's a pretty hard one to track down. So we're going to fire it up for a minute here. Because this is a fucking fantastic record, man. It's like the most punk rock I've ever heard the fucking guitar sound on a fucking Sisters of Mercy record. So, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and like say, oh, this is like the punk record, you know. Again, I'm not really qualified to make that kind of an assessment, but I will say that like this really has a roughness to it that the later records don't have. It's like on the one hand, the fact that they've been so hostile to the idea of ever reissuing these first couple 45s, you can imagine that I would tend to, that's the sort of thing I'm inclined to sneer at. But this really is kind of different. Oh shit, I put on the wrong side. I meant to put on the other one. This is great though too. Well, you hear the guitar solo on Body Electric though, so we're gonna flip it. Even the Merciful Release logo looked all primitive and shit. Here's the other label though. It's basically the same design. Go. The drum machine sounds a little bit cheaper than on the later ones too, I thought. Like that pulse seems a little bit, the bass drum seems a little less like keyed in. I don't know what the proper term for it is. It might just be me. See, that's kind of a weird thing. I was talking about this with someone. I'll let them stay anonymous just in case, but I don't think there's anything like offensive that's going to come up or anything. But you know, I lived in Germany for a few years when I was growing up, right? And I don't really talk about it that much because like it was kind of a difficult time in a lot of ways, like looking back on my life. So like when I first came back, I wasn't really that into talking about it. And then like as it became like further away and I was kind of more okay with it, it was also further away and kind of less important to me, you know. It was like when I was 16 and I'd lived there until I was, 15 3/4, it was like really, So what's funny though is with all this hindsight, is like one really sort of surreal experience that I had since then is a friend of mine from Germany tracked me down. We've been pretty tight when I was there, right? And we've been we had lost touch for like 20 years or something like that. We're in occasional touch now. We're not like super tight again, but he tracked me down. He actually came out and visited while we were living in LA. And I had a great time, right? But like, I had never noticed before how American I was compared with that. Because like all the little like sort of German stereotypes, about Germans being like uptight about shit and anal, like there's a certain kind of like breakfast like but roll that people that's really popular in Germany. They're called Brötchen. It just means little bread, okay? But like you cannot get them in the U.S. Like there are once in a while. I think I've seen 1 or 2 specialty stores where you could maybe find frozen ones, but like you just can't get them here. It's impossible, and I don't know why. It's just one of those fucking things, okay? You couldn't get root beer over there either, but all Germans eat them, and you cannot get them here. So like they were over here and like every day like they would try a different store like trying to find these things. And I'm like, dude, just relax. You're on vacation. You're in a strange country. Just fucking roll with it, right? And I'm not saying this to like cast any shade. You know what I mean? Because those sorts of like little comforts and that I get. It's just like I was looking at that and it wasn't that he was doing this shit. It was like that this was a close friend of mine who I'd been really tight with. And he was doing all these things that seemed really weird to me now that I had assimilated into a different culture in a way that he hadn't. You know what I mean? It's not that he was different, it's that I was different, you know? And that's really kind of a weird thing too with regard to like some of the old stories and that, you know? It's really, I was talking about this with someone a little while ago, like I was mentioning, because, you know, the Europeans who hang out with us in the vinyl community here are a little bit different, you know what I mean? And it's just funny to like think about like just sort of a story that's just like the way you have like an ordinary memory, and then you think about like Stunty and Jurgen and go, wow, all my friends were like that. You know, they weren't like the people I see here in South Carolina. I mean, this is American as it gets over here, okay? So it's just really kind of a surreal thing, and like I'd like you to stop and think about that. Like, imagine, and not like, oh, this is such a weird thing. Oh shit, I didn't talk to the guitar solo yet. You hear that shit? There's a real like solo section in the middle, and I fucking was talking about it, but that like edge when he starts like wailing into it, he's fucking scrubbing that thing. And it's so out of kilter with the rhythm section too. It's like he's not paying any attention almost to what the fucking bass is doing. And it's awesome, man. It's fucking genius. Like, it's a great song anyway, right? And like that reverb remix version that they did with the blue cover, that one's cool too, you know? But this one just, like the primitiveness of it really makes it kind of special. I like to set up a copy of The Damage Done one of these days, but if someone does a halfway decent reissue of it, I'd be pretty satisfied with that too. I'm not going to accept the one with that horse shit cover that I actually had at one point, but there's like someone in Australia, I think, who did a pretty nice one, but those are expensive too. And I'm not going to like pay an arm or leg for a fucking bootleg like that, you know? Well, it's happened, but we won't go there right now. It was a pretty good song too, right? So I'll bust this out one more time here. I haven't had this that long in case it isn't obvious. Yeah, and I got into this band in high school. That's kind of what got me going down some of these thought patterns. Because, like, I actually got into Sisters of Mercy between the time when I came back and when I went back for a visit around, like, 1990-ish or something like that. And my friends there got into it, too. But it was, like, the first time, like, we had sort of gotten into something separately and found common ground there, you know? Which, I don't know, seemed like a big deal at the time. But now it's just sort of one of those things. Whatever. It is surreal to think about, though. You know? And to just, like, understand certain things that are actually really foreign to me in a visceral way. But, like, I still get them because there was a time when not only was it not foreign, that's just how I was. Because that's how everyone I knew was, you know? I only spoke English at home, so back then it was all this full immersion, you know? That's part of why I'm self-conscious about my German now, too. Because fucking, I was a little kid back then. It was like, oh, I was great then when I was, like, in 7th grade. It's like, I'm like a grown man. I don't want to sound like a fucking 7th grader, you know? So the whole ego thing comes in and the whole thing just becomes a big fucking psychological mess, right? And on that note, on the note of psychological messes, we're gonna hang it up. I'm just gonna add that, like, actually, I think I just figured something out kind of recently. I was good because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get an ad on this video, and I was gonna say that I'd almost be disappointed if I didn't get a claim from Andrew Eldritch, given his reputation. But here's the thing, I've always kind of like looked down on it a little bit when people go, oh, I'm gonna get my channel struck down and shit like that, because I'm just gonna be like, who do you think you are? No one gives a shit about you. But I don't think it's actually delusions of grandeur. I think it's parasocial relationships. Because I think what people do is they see big YouTube channels. They'll see like Mr. Beast or someone like that get dinged with a copyright thing, or maybe Fantano or something like that. He's probably too smart for it. But it'll be someone like that they have a parasocial relationship and sort of feel an affinity with in that way. And so when that person who actually might be affected by the copyright system on YouTube, when they say, oh, YouTube is coming for me, then the person in the vinyl community who's repeating that back feels like, oh, they're coming for me too because they're coming for this person I have a parasocial relationship with, you know? Not to shit on anyone because I probably, well, I don't do it with that shit. But you know, I can see where the inclination's there, you know? And if that parasocial thing were totally, if I were completely like immune to that, then I probably wouldn't have had the balls to reach out to Little Bill and ask him to come on my channel and talk about fucking punk rock. So there you have it. On that note, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.